Each year, a variety of strange discoveries are made, and some of the most interesting finds are made in areas rarely explored by humans. Over the years, national park rangers have come forward and told some mysterious stories, but one that's intrigued many is that of the strange staircases. Oddly enough, this isn't anything new, and for several decades now, isolated staircases have been found through national parks. The odd thing about these discoveries is that many of these staircases are found in areas that are hard to reach, leading some to question how they got there in the first place. One national park ranger shared the following story. "I don't know if this is true in every search and rescue unit, but in mine it's sort of an unspoken regular thing we run into. You can try asking about it with other search and rescue officers, but even if they know what you're talking about, they probably won't say anything about it. We've been told not to talk about it by our superiors, and at this point we've all gotten so used to it that it doesn't even seem weird anymore. In just about every case where we're really far into the wilderness, I'm talking 30 or 40 miles, at some point we'll find a staircase in the middle of the woods. It's almost like if you took the stairs in your house, cut them out, and put them in the forest. I asked about it the first time I saw some, and the other officer just told me not to worry about it, and that it was normal. Everyone I asked said the same thing. I wanted to go check them out, but I was told, very emphatically, that I should never go near any of them. I just sort of ignore them now when I run into them because it happens so frequently." End quote. Another user responded by saying the following. "The stairs found out in the wilderness were something that always spooked my brother. He worked for the National Forest Service for over 15 years and told stories about finding these old staircases in the middle of national parks. Interestingly, he also detailed that when he would go to his superiors about them, they would never give out any details. My brother said that it was frustrating because it was so random that these stairs were just there in the middle of these forests. He always said that he thought something strange was going on, as he never saw anyone approach them. Up until he retired from the Forest Service, he said that it was these staircases that interested him the most, saying that he wished he pushed the topic further and questioned how they ended up there." End quote. This user said the following about their experience. "While visiting the Great Smoky Mountains with friends, we stumbled across some of these stairs. At the time, we didn't think much of it, and thought that perhaps the Forest Service had placed them in the woods in order to observe some of the local wildlife. After approaching the structure, there were some things that didn't look normal. For example, there were stone structures in a circle formation that were scattered around the stairs, and it looked as though the stairs themselves were very old. The stairs also didn't match anything close by, and it was as if they had been lifted from somewhere and randomly placed inside the national park. We continued looking around to see if we could see anything nearby that would give an indication as to why they were here, but we found nothing. One of the strangest things about the experience was how all of us felt very down after being close to the stairs, and it led to us leaving soon afterwards. To this day, I still have no idea why they were there, and why various stone structures were scattered around them." End quote. As of right now, people aren't entirely sure why these staircases are being found in national parks. Various theories have been put forward to explain them, with one suggestion being that they are the foundations that have been left behind by lost settlements. Others argue that they have a more sinister backstory, saying that they were created for dark gatherings or could be a site to lure people in. More out there theories suggest they could be a gateway to another dimension. As of today, many of these reports remain a mystery. Over 250,000 individuals are reported missing every year, with estimates of actual missing persons cases that are left unreported, pushing that total to more than 300,000 cases annually. With that many reports, it's no wonder that a vast majority of these cases are left unsolved. However, every now and then there are a series of missing cases that emerge that are so peculiar, they become the subject of impossible to explain theories. Steve Litze vanishes. Considered to have been one of the most bizarre cases of disappearances, a 71-year-old hunter would seemingly vanish from where he was last seen, leaving behind his vehicle and some of his equipment, despite having been unable to travel very far on foot. Known as the mysterious case of Steve Litze, on the 29th of October, back in 2011, Steve's hunting partner would report Litze missing in the late afternoon after he was unable to find his friend after about a half hour of searching. For most of his life, Steve and his wife, Suzanne Snyder, lived in the wealthy suburbs of the small town of Paradise, California. Working as a real estate agent for the Coldwell Banker Realtors Company, Steve Litze would afford to save up a sizable nest egg and eventually buy a second residence where the couple would spend the majority of their retirement years. According to Suzanne, the couple fell in love with the calm atmosphere of the small town of Elkton, Oregon, a more rural location found between the small towns of Eugene, Oregon, and Roseburg, and decided to move there so that they could be closer to the outdoors. Although Steve considered himself an avid outdoorsman, it was not until he moved to the small town of Elkton that he would get to experience the wilderness without restraint. It was not uncommon to find Steve deep within the nearby Umpqua National Forest on a week-long hunting trip, either alone or with close friends. Over the course of several years, Steve would grow to consider himself a more than competent hunter and would schedule trips in increasingly deeper and less frequented areas of the forest for longer trips. Unfortunately, it would be during these longer trips that Steve would suddenly go missing. According to the search and rescue reports, Steve decided to visit the Twin Lakes area of the Umpqua National Forest with a friend of his who had often gone on hunting trips with him in the past. After planning to spend an entire week during late October of 2011, the two men met up together and traveled to the area with extra equipment, rifles, and enough food to last them for 2 weeks. The two men would arrive at the Twin Lakes on the 22nd of October and would spend the first few days struggling to encounter wild game of any kind. At first, the men assumed that perhaps the strong winds were causing their scent to spread in the direction of the animals, warning them of their approach, but as the week dragged on, it became apparent that something far more unusual was occurring. According to Steve's hunting partner, it almost appeared as if there were no animals in the area, and the forest was far quieter than they were usually accustomed to. Not only were there no signs of large game, but animals such as birds and squirrels appeared to have been missing as well. On the last day of their hunt, on the 29th of October, the two men grew frustrated at their lack of success and decided to try a new strategy. Steve Litze and his hunting partner decided that the two of them together must have been making too much noise or creating too strong of a natural scent, causing the animals to flee far before they could get them within their sights. In order to solve this problem, the two men decided to separate in the early morning and agreed to hunt on their own, and then meet back at their parked vehicle later in the day. As the men started down the trailhead, they would choose to separate roughly 1/8 of a mile down the Twin Lakes Trail in a small culvert. Steve decided to stay in the culvert, while his partner continued on up ahead a few hundred feet away. After a few hours, Steve's hunting partner would return back down the trail, but would find that Steve was nowhere to be found. After returning to the vehicle and seeing no sign that Steve had returned, the partner immediately went back to where he had last seen Steve Litze and called out to him for several minutes. Worried that something far worse had happened, given Steve's old age and inability to travel far, the hunting partner immediately contacted the local Douglas County Sheriff's Office to notify the local law enforcement that Steve was missing. Within only a couple of hours, the Sheriff's Department would contact the United States Forest Service, National Guard, and a variety of other search and rescue teams, gathering together more than 50 volunteers to begin their search for Steve Litze. Using the location of where he had last been seen, the search and rescue teams expanded throughout the area, covering more than 30 square miles, a distance far greater than Steve Litze would have been able to cover on his own. After 2 days and more than 2,000 man-hours of searching, volunteers and investigators were no closer to understanding where Steve Litze had gone, with no sign of his equipment appearing anywhere within the area. Frustrated and worried that the 71-year-old man had collapsed somewhere, search and rescue teams would decide to comb over areas where they had already checked with a team of 8 different bloodhounds that were brought into the area on the 31st of October. Despite experienced bloodhounds having aided in the recovery of missing persons in the past, not a single one of the canines could follow the scent after picking it up in the culvert, almost as if Steve Litze had seemingly vanished into thin air. The National Guard would aid search and rescue teams by providing aircraft support in the form of helicopters, equipped with state-of-the-art thermal imaging and infrared cameras. Several search and rescue teams would also employ the use of donated all-terrain vehicles to cross over trails and nearby roads, in the hopes of finding Steve waiting alongside one of the many pathways that one could easily stumble across in the area. After 3 days of searching, local news outlets would claim that search and rescue volunteers had located pieces of trash believed to have belonged to Steve's packed food rations, though nothing could be confirmed. However, what was even more odd was that many of the trash and wrappers believed to have belonged to Steve Litze were scattered across many different directions across dozens of miles. All hope would be lost only after a few days, when a sudden snowstorm would descend on the area where Litze had disappeared. Although forecasts claimed that the weather would be clear for over 2 weeks, it appeared that the blizzard was far stronger than anyone had anticipated and temporarily halted search and rescue efforts for a couple days, forcing any aerial to ground and stay out of the area until the weather could clear. After the blizzard, the fresh snow would prove to be the greatest obstacle, as it blanketed any possible tracks left behind by Steve Litze. After roughly 7 days and nights of searching for the 71-year-old man, all search and rescue efforts were terminated, and Litze was presumed to have passed away in the wilderness. Investigators and search and rescue volunteers remained troubled after the efforts in locating Steve Litze were completely abandoned. It seemed incredibly difficult to understand how exactly the 71-year-old could have disappeared from the area. Not only did Litze have all of the necessary supplies for his survival, he was also dressed correctly for the weather and was armed with his rifle, which had never been recovered. Litze had been an experienced hunter and was well aware of the rule to let off 3 rounds in the event that he was in trouble, but no sounds were ever heard from his location or while search and rescue volunteers were trying to locate him. National parks can pose some risks and hazards, but overall they are generally safe places to visit as long as visitors take necessary precautions and follow park rules and guidelines. National parks are home to a wide variety of wildlife, and encounters with animals such as bears, moose, or bison can be dangerous if visitors are not aware of how to safely interact with them. Weather conditions in national parks can be unpredictable, and visitors should be prepared for extreme temperatures, storms, and other weather-related hazards. National parks often feature rugged terrain, steep cliffs, and other natural hazards that can pose a risk to visitors who are not familiar with the area. Water-related hazards, such as swift currents, cold temperatures, and dangerous underwater hazards, can pose a risk to visitors who are not experienced in water safety. So, what do you make of these national park mysteries? Be sure to leave your questions and answers in the comments section below and help us to grow this community while working to solve these unexplained mysteries. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos.